The moment the taxi pulled up to the curb of the old two-story house on Maple Street, in the quiet suburb of Oakwood, Texas, my stomach twisted into knots I had not felt since I was a kid. 10 years had passed since the day my father had shoved me out the door with nothing but a backpack and the words, "You're not my son anymore," ringing in my ears, all because he caught me kissing Tommy Jenkins behind the school gym. I was 14 then, scared and alone, convinced my life was over because I was gay in a town that did not tolerate differences. Now at 24 I stood here as Brody Thompson, a graphic designer with a thriving career in New York City, an apartment I owned, and most importantly Elias by my side in the car waiting for my signal to join me. I took a deep breath, the warm Texas air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and distant barbecue smoke, reminding me of summers that used to feel safe. The house looked the same, white siding peeling a bit more, the porch swing still creaking in the breeze, the American flag my father proudly hung every Memorial Day fluttering lazily. But I was different. The boy who had cried himself to sleep in shelters and on friends' couches was gone. In his place was a man who had fought for every inch of his identity, who had learned that love was not a sin but a strength. My hand trembled as I grabbed the suitcase from the trunk, the one containing clothes neatly folded and a photo album. Elias had helped me assemble proof of the life I had built without them. Elias, with his kind blue eyes and steady presence, had wanted to come with me from the start. "You do not have to do this alone, Brody," he had said on the plane, his hand squeezing mine. But I insisted on facing the initial moment solo. This was my battle, my closure. As I walked up the path, memories flooded back like a dam breaking. The night it happened, I had come home late from the library thinking I could hide the truth forever. But my father was waiting, his face red with rage after a neighbor had seen me with Tommy. "What kind of boy are you?" he had yelled, his voice echoing through the house as my mother stood silent in the kitchen, tears streaming. My sister Emily, only 12 then, had peeked from the stairs, her eyes wide with confusion. He did not give me a chance to explain. The door slammed and that was it. No money, no goodbye, just the cold night air and the realization that my family chose tradition over me. I reached the door, my finger hovering over the bell. The sound echoed inside and footsteps approached. The door opened and there he was, Robert Thompson, my father, older now with more gray in his hair but the same stern jaw. His eyes widened, mouth opening but no words coming out. "Brody?" he whispered as if seeing a ghost. "Yeah, Dad. It is me," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I am home." The shock on his face was priceless, but it was nothing compared to what was coming when he learned about Elias and the man I had become. Little did he know this return was about to unravel everything he thought he knew about his son and force us all to face the truths we had buried for years. My mother Linda appeared behind him, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyes already filling with tears. "Oh my God, Brody, is that really you?" she cried, pulling me into a hug that felt both foreign and familiar. Emily, now 22, rushed down the stairs and threw her arms around us both, laughing and sobbing at the same time. For a moment the hallway felt too small, the air too thick with unspoken years. My father stood frozen, his hand still on the doorknob, as if he could slam it again and make the past decade disappear. I stepped back gently from the embrace and looked him in the eye. "I did not come to fight, Dad. I came because Mom called and said you all needed to talk. And because I finally have something worth showing you." He nodded once stiffly but said nothing. That silence hurt more than any shout ever had. I turned toward the car and waved. Elias stepped out, tall and confident in his button-down shirt, the one I had bought him for our anniversary. He walked up the path carrying his own small bag and offered a warm smile that could melt ice. "Hello, everyone. I am Elias. It is good to finally meet you." The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face drained of color, my mother's hand flew to her mouth, and Emily's eyes darted between us in stunned understanding. In that single instant, the truth I had carried for 10 years landed like a stone in still water. This was not just a homecoming. This was the beginning of the hardest conversation our family had ever faced, and I was ready for every word of it. The next hour passed in a blur of awkward small talk and careful glances. We sat in the living room, the same faded couch where I used to watch Sunday football with my dad, now feeling like a battlefield. Mom kept refilling glasses of sweet tea, her way of holding everything together. Emily asked about New York, my job, the museums I had visited, anything to fill the gaps. Elias answered gracefully, sharing just enough to show he was real without pushing too hard. I watched my father the whole time, waiting for the explosion I remembered so well. Instead, he stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the backyard where I had once learned to ride a bike. 10 years, Brody, he said quietly. 10 years, and you show up with him. His voice cracked on the last word, but he did not turn around. I felt Elias's hand brush mine under the coffee table, a silent reminder that I was not alone. I did not come to hurt anyone, I replied. I came because I finally stopped running from who I am. And because maybe it is time we all stopped running too. That night, as I lay in my old childhood bed, the one with the faded baseball posters still on the wall, Elias slept on the couch downstairs at Mom's insistence. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment since the doorbell rang. The shock, the tears, the careful distance my father kept. It was only the first day, yet already the weight of everything we had lost pressed down on me. I thought about the nights I had spent in a youth shelter in Dallas, the kind stranger who gave me bus fare to New York, the first apartment I shared with 3 other guys just trying to survive. I thought about the day I met Elias at a little cafe in Brooklyn, how his laugh had cut through the noise of my loneliness like sunlight. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more revelations. But for the first time in 10 years, I was not afraid of the answers. Morning light filtered through the kitchen curtains, the same yellow ones Mom had hung when I was 10. I found her at the stove flipping pancakes the way she used to on Saturdays before everything changed. "You still like them with chocolate chips?" she asked without turning around, her voice soft. I nodded and slid onto the stool at the island. Elias was already there pouring coffee, looking perfectly at ease even after the tension of last night. We ate in relative quiet until Emily burst in from her shift at the hospital, scrubs still on. "Okay, spill," she said, pointing her fork at me. "How did you two meet? And how did you survive all those years alone?" Her questions were gentle, but they opened the floodgates. I told them about the shelter, the odd jobs, the scholarship that got me into design school. I skipped the darkest nights, the times I had considered giving up, because I wanted them to see the strength, not the scars. Elias added the lighter parts, how we bonded over bad coffee and shared dreams of a life without hiding. Dad walked in halfway through, still in his work shirt from the factory. He poured coffee but did not sit. "So you are some big shot in the city now," he muttered. I met his eyes. "I am successful because I had to be, Dad. No safety net, no family to call when things got hard. But I made it. And I did it without apologizing for who I love." The room went still. Mom's hand paused midair. Emily looked between us, hopeful. Elias stayed quiet, giving me the space I needed. Later that afternoon, Dad asked me to help him in the garage, a ritual from my childhood. Tools clanged as he worked on an old truck engine. "That boy Tommy," he said suddenly. "Was he the only one?" I wiped grease from my hands. "No, Dad. There were others. But none of them were the reason you threw me out. The reason was me. Just me being honest." He did not answer right away. Instead, he handed me a wrench and we worked side by side in silence, the kind that felt heavier than words. That evening, Elias and I took a walk around the neighborhood. The streets looked smaller now, the houses closer together. "They are trying," he said, squeezing my hand. "Even your dad. It is not perfect, but it is a start." I wanted to believe him, but doubt lingered. We stopped at the park where I had once played Little League. Under the same oak tree, I pulled Elias close and kissed him softly, the way I had dreamed of doing openly for years. For that moment, the past felt far away. Back at the house, Mom had pulled out old photo albums. We laughed at pictures of me as a chubby toddler, Emily as a gap-toothed kid. Dad lingered in the doorway, watching but not joining. When everyone went to bed, I found him on the porch staring at the stars. "I thought I was protecting you," he said finally. "From a world that would hurt you. Turns out I was the one who hurt you most." His voice broke, and for the first time since I arrived, I saw tears in his eyes. I sat beside him, not touching, just present. "We cannot change the past, Dad. But we can choose what happens next." The next few days blurred into a rhythm of cautious conversations and shared meals. Emily took Elias and me to her favorite coffee shop in town, the one that had opened after I left. Locals stared, but no one said anything cruel. Small victories. One night Jake, my old best friend from high school, showed up unannounced. He had been the one who told Dad about Tommy all those years ago, thinking he was helping. The betrayal still stung, but Jake apologized with genuine regret. I was scared too, Brody. For you and for me. We talked late into the night, and somehow the anger I had carried lifted a little. Elias and I stole quiet moments in the backyard, talking about our future, the apartment we shared, the trip to Italy we planned. He reminded me why I had come back, not just for them but for the piece of myself I had left behind. Yet, beneath the surface, tension built. Dad avoided Elias. Mom worried about what the neighbors would say. Emily pushed for more openness. I felt the old pressure rising, the same pressure that had once driven me away. One afternoon Dad and I drove to the hardware store. In the truck he cleared his throat. "Your mother has been sick, Brody. Cancer. That is why she called you." We did not know how much time we had. The words hit like a punch. All the anger I had prepared melted into fear. I pulled over and we sat in silence until I could speak. "Why did not you tell me sooner?" He looked out the window. "Pride, I guess. Same pride that made me push you away." In that moment, the big turning point began to form. The illness was not just a reason to return, it was the catalyst that would force us all to choose between old fears and new beginnings. The revelation about Mom's cancer hung over the house like a storm cloud. Doctor appointments, hospital visits, and whispered prayers filled the days. I canceled my return flight to New York, and Elias adjusted his work schedule from his laptop at the kitchen table. Dad watched us with new eyes, the anger softening into something closer to exhaustion. "You did not have to stay," he said one evening as we sat on the porch. "But I am glad you did." It was the closest he had come to an apology. I spent mornings with Mom at the hospital, holding her hand while she received treatment. She told me stories I had never heard about her own youth, about dreams she had given up for family expectations. "I should have stood up for you, Brody," she whispered during one chemo session. "But I was scared too. Scared of losing everything." Her honesty cracked open doors I thought were sealed forever. Elias brought flowers and sat quietly, offering support without demanding attention. The nurses smiled at us the way they smiled at any couple, and for the first time in Oakwood that felt normal. One weekend, Emily organized a family barbecue to lift spirits. Neighbors came, some I remembered from Little League, others new faces. Jake brought his wife and kids, and for a few hours the yard echoed with laughter. Dad flipped burgers while Elias helped set up tables. I caught Dad watching us, his expression unreadable. Later, when the guests left, he pulled me aside. "He seems like a good man," he admitted. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of 10 years. Yet not everything was smooth. Old friends from high school heard I was back and rumors spread. One night at the local diner, a former classmate made a crude comment about Elias and me. I stood up ready to confront him, but Elias placed a calm hand on my arm. "Let it go, Brody. We are bigger than this." His strength reminded me why I had fallen in love with him the night we met at that Brooklyn cafe. He had been reading a book on human rights, I had been sketching logos for a client. Our conversation flowed like we had known each other forever. 3 months later, we moved in together. 2 years after that, we bought the ring I still had not given him. Back in Oakwood, the misunderstanding that nearly broke us came from an unexpected place. Emily found an old letter I had written to Tommy the night I was kicked out. She read it aloud at dinner, thinking it would help Dad understand. Instead, it stirred up old pain. Dad left the table without a word. I followed him to the garage where he stood staring at tools. "You really loved that boy," he said. "And I took that from you." The conversation stretched late into the night, revealing layers of his own upbringing: strict father, military expectations, no room for weakness. For the first time, I saw him not as a villain but as a man trapped by the same world that had hurt me. Elias and I talked on the back porch afterward. "This is healing, Brody," he said. "Even when it hurts." I nodded, but inside doubt lingered. What if the progress was temporary? What if Mom's illness ended and the old walls went back up? That night, I lay awake listening to the crickets, remembering the betrayal that had started it all. Jake had not meant harm, but his fear had cost me everything. Now, years later, he was trying to make amends by helping with Mom's yard work. Forgiveness was not easy, but it was necessary. The big turning point arrived during Mom's worst week. She was too weak to leave the hospital, and the doctors warned us to prepare. Dad broke down in the waiting room for the first time I had ever seen. "I cannot lose her," he sobbed. I held him the way he had never held me. In that moment something shifted. He looked at Elias, who had stayed all night with coffee and blankets. "Thank you for being here for my son," Dad said quietly. Elias simply nodded. The words were small, but they cracked the foundation of years of silence. We brought Mom home the next day with medication and hope. The house filled with quiet determination. I cooked meals, Elias ran errands, Emily coordinated schedules. Dad and I repaired the porch swing together, talking about everything and nothing. One evening he asked about our life in New York. I showed him photos of our apartment, the rooftop garden, the Pride Parade we had marched in. He listened without judgment. "I do not understand it all," he admitted. "But I see how happy you are. That is enough for now." As Mom grew stronger, the family dynamic changed. We shared stories, laughed at old memories, and slowly built new ones. Elias became part of the fabric, not an outsider. The societal pressure that had once felt suffocating now seemed distant. Oakwood was still conservative, but pockets of kindness appeared, neighbors who waved, Elias's colleagues who sent well wishes. I realized acceptance was not a single moment but a series of small decisions. With Mom improving, the focus shifted to the future. Dad suggested a family trip to the lake house we had not visited since I was 12. The drive was filled with stories and Elias's jokes, easing any remaining tension. At the lake we fished, swam, and sat around the fire pit under stars. One night Dad asked Elias about his job as a public defender. They talked for hours about justice, fairness, and protecting the vulnerable. I watched from the dock, heart full. Yet a new conflict emerged. A local newspaper wanted to run a story about Mom's recovery and our reunited family. The reporter hinted at wanting details about my return and my relationship. Dad hesitated. "The town is not ready," he said. I felt the old rejection rising. "Then maybe we should help them get ready," I replied. Elias supported me but understood Dad's fear. The discussion lasted days until Emily pointed out that hiding was what had hurt us before. Dad finally agreed to a short interview with strict boundaries. The article came out positive, focusing on love and second chances. Comments online were mixed, but the support outweighed the negativity. Jake called to say he was proud. Old teachers sent messages. Slowly, the town's perception shifted. One afternoon at the grocery store, a woman I did not know stopped us. "Your story gave me courage to talk to my son," she said. The impact was bigger than I had imagined. Back home, Dad and I cleared out the attic, finding boxes of my old drawings. He flipped through them quietly. "You always had talent," he said. "I should have encouraged it instead of—" He did not finish, but the meaning was clear. We framed one and hung it in the living room, a small symbol of new beginnings. Elias and I took long walks discussing our next steps. He wanted to propose but waited for the perfect moment. I wanted to ask him here, in the place where my story began and hopefully where it would find peace. A misunderstanding threatened everything when an old email from Tommy surfaced on social media. Someone from high school had posted it thinking it was funny. The comments were harsh. Dad saw them, and for a moment the old anger flashed. "Is this what people will always say?" he asked. I explained the context, the pain, the growth. Elias stepped in calmly, sharing his own experiences with prejudice. The conversation turned into a breakthrough. Dad admitted his fears were about his own failures as a father. "I thought if I pushed hard enough you would change. Instead I lost you." Tears followed, honest ones that healed more than any apology. We spent the next week repairing more than the house. We repaired trust. Emily started dating a nurse from the hospital and brought her home for dinner. The table felt fuller. Mom baked pies and laughed freely for the first time in months. Elias and I stole kisses in the backyard, feeling the weight of secrecy lift. One evening Dad pulled me aside. "I want to meet your friends in New York someday. See the life you built." The invitation meant everything. We hugged, the first real hug in a decade. The betrayal from years ago, the secret that had been revealed, the sacrifice of leaving everything behind, all of it had led to this moment of genuine connection. As summer faded, the family faced its greatest test. Mom's follow-up scans showed the cancer was in remission, but the treatment had weakened her heart. Doctors recommended a specialist in Dallas. The drive became a family road trip, Dad driving, Mom in the passenger seat, Emily, Elias, and me in the back. We sang old songs and shared memories, the miles melting years of distance. At the hospital, the news was cautiously optimistic. During the wait, Elias and I walked the hospital garden. "This is what family looks like," he said. I agreed, but felt the pull of our life in New York. We had jobs waiting, friends missing us. Yet leaving now felt impossible. That night in the hotel, Dad knocked on our door. "I have been thinking," he said, "about the past. About how I failed you." He handed me a letter he had written the night I left 10 years ago but never sent. It was full of regret and love he had been too proud to show. Reading it, I cried for the boy I had been and the man I had become. The turning point came during a late-night conversation in the hospital cafeteria. Dad looked at Elias and said, "Thank you for loving my son when I could not." Elias replied, "He is easy to love." The simple exchange broke the last barrier. We talked until dawn about everything: expectations, fear, acceptance. Dad shared his own struggles with his father, a man who had never accepted his choices either. The cycle was breaking here in this fluorescent-lit room. Back in Oakwood, we celebrated Mom's progress with a small party. Jake and his family came, neighbors brought casseroles. I finally gave Elias the ring under the oak tree in the park where our story had quietly begun in my heart years ago. He said yes with tears and laughter. The family cheered, Dad clapping loudest of all. Yet one final hurdle remained. A distant relative posted online criticizing our lifestyle and tagging the family. The comments poured in. Instead of hiding, Dad responded publicly for the first time. "My son is gay and I am proud of the man he is." The post went viral locally. Support flooded in. The power of his words healed wounds I thought permanent. Elias and I planned our wedding for next spring in New York, but promised frequent visits to Oakwood. The sacrifice of staying, the misunderstandings, the betrayals, the truths faced, all had forged a stronger bond. I had grown from the scared boy into a man who understood that love required courage every day. The leaves turned gold and red as we prepared to head back to New York. Mom packed care packages, Dad checked the car tires twice. At the airport, the goodbye was different: no slammed doors, no silence. Hugs, tears, and promises to call every Sunday. Emily whispered, "Bring me to the wedding." Dad shook Elias's hand firmly. "Take care of my boy." The words carried the weight of redemption. On the plane, I rested my head on Elias's shoulder, watching Texas disappear below. 10 years ago, I had left broken. Today, I left whole. The journey had been messy, full of pain and unexpected grace. I thought about the loyal friendships that endured, the rifts that mended, the family that chose love over tradition. Most of all, I thought about the man beside me who had walked every step without asking me to be anything but myself. Back in our Brooklyn apartment, the city lights welcomed us. We hung new photos on the wall, ones from Oakwood, the lake, the hospital garden. Life resumed with work deadlines and weekend brunches, but now carried deeper peace. Mom's health stabilized. Dad started therapy to unpack his past. Emily visited for Thanksgiving. The circle grew stronger. One quiet evening, Elias and I sat on the rooftop. "We did it," he said. I smiled, knowing the real victory was not the return but the growth that followed. We had faced every challenge head-on and emerged not just surviving but thriving. The story was not over, but the chapter of rejection had closed. In its place stood acceptance, understanding, and a love that had proven unbreakable. Can a single act of forgiveness truly erase a decade of pain? True or false?